Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Margaret Teague, LRS Education Services Manager. I thank you for joining us today for our webinar titled Get More Out of ITIL 4. As one of the hosts for today's webinar, it gives me great pleasure to introduce to you their presenters, Joyce Parker and Donna Knapp. Joyce is an ITIL expert and instructor. Some of you may have joined one of our classes with Joyce as the instructor, either private or public. And her student class surveys are always excellent, and her students have a high pass rate for the exams. Donna Knapp is also an ITIL expert, in addition to being an author for ITSM Academy's curriculum. We are thrilled to have her join us today as a subject matter expert. A quick overview of LRS Education Services before we hop into the presentation. LRS has been providing technology-related instructor-led training from our offices in Springfield and Bloomington, Illinois since 1994. In 2010, we implemented remote technology to our classrooms and instructors, which has been extremely useful in this last year. As you can see from the slide, we provide a wide range of training and services and look forward to answering any questions you may have on how we can help meet your ITIL training goals or any others from our portfolio of classes. With that being said, I'll hand off to Joyce and Donna. And again, thank you for being with us.
Thank you, Margaret.
Thank you, Margaret. This is Joyce. And as you all know, the focus of today's webinar is on ITIL 4 and why you should care. And in order to do that, Donna and I are going to talk a little bit about what ITIL is, why and how it's evolved to ITIL 4, and how it aligns with some other frameworks like DevOps and Lean and Agile and SRE. Then we'll speak to how you can help your organization co-create value with the business. And at the end of the day, however, the session's for you. So we will answer your questions as we go along or address them at the end of the session. And we're going to start out by having you to respond to 2 polls so we can help gauge your familiarity with ITIL and service management. Go ahead and answer the first one with how familiar are you with ITIL and service management? Very familiar, somewhat just learning, have never heard of ITIL or other, and you can actually chat in your answer.
So far we have 75% just learning, so that's excellent. We love when we have newbies in webinars.
Yes, we can mold them.
So about 75% have voted. We'll give it a few more seconds, and then we're going to go ahead and close the poll. And we have some never have heard of ITIL as well. So it looks like I'm not seeing any additional responses in, so I'm going to go ahead and close the poll and go ahead and share the results. 8% very familiar, 8% somewhat familiar at the foundation level, 75% just learning, and 8% never heard of. So that's great.
That's great, yes.
Yeah.
And Donna, did you want to do the second one?
Yep. And so this kind of speaks to what release of ITIL are you most familiar with?
Oh, we got a lot of V2s.
Yeah, Padma chatted in that she took it in 2009. So yeah, you're a V2er for sure. Yeah. We'll give it a few more minutes. We have 75% have voted. And I'm not seeing any more responses coming in, so here we go.
Great, well, thank you so much. So we'll kind of talk a little bit about ITIL 3, a lot more about ITIL 4, as well as how it works with some of the other frameworks or methodologies you might be using. So let's go ahead and get started. And so we're going to go back to the slide deck, and basically the next slide actually starts out by saying that ITIL is best practice guidance for service management. But what does that really mean? And so it's a framework of proven best practices, meaning they actually work. And it's guidance for organizations as they run effective IT and deliver services with the ultimate goal of delivering value to customers. And it's important to understand what ITIL is not. And ITIL is not a prescriptive set of rules. It's not a cookie cutter approach to IT service management. It's intended to be very flexible and applicable to all organizations. And one of the major benefits of ITIL has been, and it still is it provides a common language. And the tens of thousands of companies worldwide who have adopted ITIL all know what an incident is. They know how to handle problems and what changes are. And I often get comments after ITIL classes that students now understand what everybody else is talking about, or even feel they can better communicate with coworkers and even suppliers. And one of the fundamental concepts of ITIL is the idea of services. And when you really think about it in today's world, most organizations' core services like banking services or medical services or network services are IT enabled. And as a result, IT service management has now become a key strategic capability for organizations. And as you guys know, and as we're going to talk a little bit about, and Donna, ITIL's not new, is it?
It's not new. I mean, ITIL was originally introduced in the 1980s. And if you think back, if you were around back then, what they were trying to figure out was how do we manage this proliferation of technology? You know, we were starting to see personal computers being introduced in organizations, desktop computers. And it's continued to evolve since then. The latest iteration of ITIL was ITIL 2011. And ITIL 2011 was initially introduced in 2009, and it got reshaped a little bit and republished in 2011. And if you think back to what was going on in the 2009, 2010 timeframe when the research was being done for the version 3 version of ITIL, Agile was starting to find its way into organizations. The term DevOps, for example, was actually coined in 2009. Site Reliability Engineering, or SRE, was actually introduced by Google back in 2003, but it really hadn't found its way into the mainstream, and it certainly hadn't found its way to the enterprise. In fact, SRE has just within the past couple of years started to find its way into the enterprise. So from 2011 to when ITIL 4 was introduced, which was in 2019, a lot happened. Again, we saw Agile become very much mainstream. We saw organizations starting to increasingly leverage Lean, especially for software development. In fact, DevOps roots are in Lean. DevOps certainly has emerged and found its way into the mainstream. In fact, I just saw it that it's kind of on the tail end of the Gartner hype cycle at this point, which basically means it's it's mainstream, right? It's best practice. So ITIL had to evolve in order to better reflect everything that was going on in our organizations in terms of how we design and develop and manage IT services. And, this is a favorite topic of mine, and I could talk about it forever. But we're really here to talk about ITIL. So ITIL, Joyce, let's come back to ITIL. And what are your thoughts on why ITIL had to evolve?
Yeah, Donna, there are definitely some other challenges out there and some things that really forced ITIL to kind of do an evolution. And one of the longtime challenges for organizations is minimizing silos. And the DevOps movement addresses the silos of Dev and Ops. But there are many other silos in organizations like security and QA and all the other teams. And I don't think I've ever worked with a company that doesn't have some kind of silos. And so the different silos in an organization can really impede efficient and effective work. Also, in today's world, to stay competitive, customers are demanding shorter time to market. So there's a challenge of high velocity service delivery, and that influences all of the practices of a service provider. Donna just mentioned technology, and even back in ITIL version 3. And think about now, between 2011 and now, all the breakthroughs in technology, robotics, right? Artificial intelligence, the Internet of Things, infrastructure as a service, security as code, 3D printing. And so the fourth industrial revolution is paving the way for transformative changes and is radically disrupting almost every business sector. And of course, COVID-19 has put the challenges of going virtual smack in the limelight. So ITIL absolutely needed to evolve. And to be quite honest, we as organizations needed to evolve as well, or we won't be around anymore and certainly won't be successful. So ITIL 4 brings ITIL up to date by reshaping the kind of established practices to address these challenges I just talked about. And to me, one of the biggest things that ITIL 4 stresses is its flexibility. It's not a one-size-fits-all approach. It never has been. And so it is applicable to all organizations. One's doing waterfall development, one's using Agile, one's using both, right? Or organizations that are in various stages of digital transformations. And depending on where your organization is today, you may need to create or expand or even just improve your IT service management capability. Let's think about incident management in today's fast-paced world, right? Our old hierarchical or tiered models where incidents are escalated through various levels of support may not be the best way to resolve all incidents. It can take a lot of time to resolve an incident. And this model puts a lot of burden on our service desk agents. And ITIL 4 speaks to a concept called swarming, which encourages collaboration between staff and no escalation of incidents. So it's more of a flat hierarchy where everyone works on an incident until it's clear who should handle it. Change management is another one, or change enablement. It also needs to evolve in today's high velocity world. And unfortunately, in previous versions of ITIL, change management was often seen as a bureaucratic, rigid process with a lot of controls. And while not intended to do so, the CAB, or Change Advisory Board, often acted as a bottleneck to getting changes approved. And if you were a change manager, people started running when they saw you coming. And basically, some organizations were too risk averse and focused too much on trying to prevent negative impact from changes. And this resulted in unacceptable lead times. And so in today's world, time to market is increasingly critical. And so ITIL 4 actually speaks to designing the change enablement practice to protect customers and users, but not to prohibit speed or agility or innovation. And so change is a good thing, and we should be doing more change, not less change. And as Donna mentioned, roots in Agile and things like that, and in keeping in line with Agile influence, these changes that we're doing should be smaller, not the huge mammoth projects of the past, which lessens the risk. And DevOps speaks to automating changes via the CI/CD pipeline, which enables faster, more consistent changes. So the goal is to be agile and fast, but have just enough control not to wreak havoc downstream. And the State of DevOps report has been validating this for years. High-performing organizations do not sacrifice quality and stability for speed. And in terms of change enablement, decentralizing change approval makes peer review a top predictor of high performance. And so the next slide actually talks a little bit more, because why are we here, talks a little bit more about ITIL 4. And since most of you are not really super familiar with it, we're going to talk a little bit about this. And one of the concepts I really love in ITIL 4 is the first bullet, the idea of co-creation of value. And doing this through active collaboration between service providers, consumers, and other stakeholders. It's not just about value for the consumer. All stakeholders get some kind of value, and everybody has to collaborate or participate in creating that value, starting with the definition of requirements, designing solutions, to provisioning services. For example, in order to get value from Facebook, I have to have a smart device. I have to have internet capability. I have to have a user ID. And then my feedback helps Facebook continually improve its app. And if you look at the diagrams at the bottom of the slide, on the left-hand side is ITIL's service value system. And you can see that the outcome on the right-hand side speaks to value. The middle diagram, the service value chain. In the middle, and then to the right of that, you see value is the outcome of that as well. And then the 4 dimensions on the right-hand side, you can see value is in the center of that. And for those of you who are new to ITIL 4 and aren't really familiar with the term 4 dimensions, it's holistically all of the areas that we need to consider when we deliver and support different services and products. For those of you, because there's a lot of V3 people in here, it's actually the evolution of the service lifecycle and the 4 Ps from ITIL version 3. Something else about ITIL 4, we talked about the fact about ITIL being best practice guidance. The downside of best practices is that they lag, right? It takes time to glean information from a lot of companies across many industries. So best practices only emerge after organizations have been doing things for a while, right? It took DevOps, Donna, 10 years to become best practice. So that's another reason that ITIL was a bit outdated, right? There was a tendency to reflect on practices that hadn't been in place for a lot of years. So in ITIL 4, what you see is best practices and exploratory ways of working. And Donna mentioned that some organizations are using site reliability engineering. Another term, chaos engineering, is being introduced as a technique to help verify resiliency of systems. Some organizations with really complex environments use safe-to-fail experiments. These are small controlled experiments to identify possible ways of approaching a problem. So really, ITIL now is ahead of the game and not outdated. It is principles-based, which is a nod to the 7 guiding principles, which we're going to talk about in a little bit, that help guide us in our service management journey. And probably one of the biggest concepts that's new to ITIL 4 is the concept of value streams. And most of us, especially the version 3 people, we're used to focusing on processes. And they're still in ITIL 4, but value streams take us up to a higher level and enable a lot more flexibility for the tasks that we perform to create and deliver products and services. So, Donna, we've talked a little bit about aligning with other ways of working. Could you expand a little more on how ITIL aligns with some of the other ways of working?
Sure. There's actually been a lot of conversation about, is it ITIL or DevOps, and is DevOps obsoleting ITIL? Is it Agile or ITIL? And there is no or in that conversation. When you look at the highest performing organizations, you'll very often find that what they have done is very, very successfully leverage Agile and Lean and DevOps and ITIL. Agile gives us that ability to take an iterative and incremental approach to developing our products and services. DevOps really enables the creation of a pipeline that lets us release our revised software, quickly and frequently and reliably. Lean really is about focusing on value, the concept of value stream mapping, which has been brought into ITIL 4, is really a lean concept. But lean also focuses very much on creating a culture within an organization where you build trust within that organization, you encourage collaboration within the organization. And DevOps also brings to us practices that you might be familiar with, like continuous integration and continuous delivery and continuous development. So we're starting to see those types of practices being integrated into ITIL, and ITIL speaking to how organizations can leverage these different ways of working and integrate them with their traditional ITIL processes, what we're now referring to as practices. So I want to actually at this point do our third poll and ask, how many of you are familiar with or certified in or have had some type of training in these adjacent ways of working, such as Lean and Agile and DevOps? So we'll give a few seconds for everybody to respond to the poll.
So most everybody seems
I'm
to
seeing
have
others, so go ahead and
Lean.
chat. You can use your chat box to chat your, those of you who selected other, go ahead and chat in. So excellent, Lean Six Sigma, absolutely.
Okay.
All right, I'm going to give it a few more seconds. We've got about
Got a few
60%.
SREs.
Yeah,
Nice.
and it's interesting. SRE in the last couple of years has followed a similar trajectory to DevOps. It took a lot of years for DevOps to find its way into enterprises. It was being leveraged by the Googles and the Facebooks and those big high transaction, ultra scale organizations. And it took a little bit for them to find their way into the enterprise. And SRE's kind of taken that same trajectory. So I've got 75%, so I'm going to go ahead and close the poll. So excellent, 67% Lean, 58% Agile, awesome, 17% DevOps, site reliability, engineering. We're also seeing, in terms of other things chatted in, PMP, Certified Scrum Master, POPM. I don't know what that is. So Padmaja, if you could chat in. I'm sure once I see it, it'll be obvious to me, but I'm not sure I know what that is. So great, there's familiarity. You're starting to maybe see these concepts being introduced in your organization. Product owner, product manager, excellent. Thank you so much. And that is very much, it's interesting you put that, because product management is very much a focus in ITIL 4, especially in high velocity IT, where we're really seeing a move to a more product-centric way of managing products and services, as opposed to those kind of traditional IT silos. Excellent, thank you. So let me share that out for 1 second, and then we'll go ahead and move on and continue talking a little bit about our ITIL 4 key components. So I talked a little bit about this slide previously, how Lean, Agile, resilient. Joyce mentioned things like chaos engineering and site reliability, and continuous help us. And really DevOps kind of builds on all of these concepts. DevOps is more the cultural focus in terms of enabling dev and ops practitioners to collaborate more closely together and to work more closely together. So again, let's kind of continue our discussion and our focus on ITIL 4 and talk quickly about the ITIL 4 components. So
yeah, so the service value system or the SVS is really the quote unquote face of ITIL 4. And it's really, it's the management system upon which ITIL 4 sits. And it's a simple model, with 5 components, and encourages systems thinking. And so on the left-hand side are the 2 inputs to this system. And when you think about it, all organizations have opportunities to add value by introducing new technology or new services, as well as they all have demand for existing products and services. So those are the inputs. And then on the right-hand side is the outcome, what we're shooting for, and that's value. And as I mentioned previously, there are many types of value for a lot of different kinds of stakeholders. And the SVS has 5 components shown in the middle of the diagram, starting with the guiding principles at the top. And to add on to what I said a few slides ago, the guiding principles are really recommendations that provide guidance to organizations all the time and in all circumstances. And notice how the purple band, surrounds all the other SVS components. It should guide us all the time. And governance, a topic most of us are familiar with, supports the guiding principles and is really how an organization is directed and controlled. How do we make sure that organizations meet their goals and mission? And all organizations really have to address governance in some way, shape, or form. There are actually separate slides on the service value chain and the practices coming up, so I'm going to skip them for now. But one of the big emphasis in ITIL 4 is on continual improvement. And really the idea that it should be performed all the time, not just the third Thursday of the month. And so in ITIL 4, we see continual improvement as an SVS component. Right here, we see it as a service value chain activity. We'll see that next, and as a practice in and of itself. And Donna and I always say that if you come away from an ITIL presentation or class and don't realize that there's always room for improvement, we as educators have not done our jobs. Mm-hmm. So we really, it's something that we all emphasize. And so on the next slide, it's going to dive deeper into the service value chain, which is really the operating model, right? It's a set of 6 interconnected activities. You can see them: plan and design and transition and obtain and build and engage and deliver and support and improve. And these activities we perform to respond to demand on the left-hand side, right? And then create products and services which facilitate that value that we talked about. And so when you look at these activities, they encompass the work we do every day, right? We plan, we engage with stakeholders to determine their needs. We obtain new resources, we build things, we support products and services. And so one of the knocks on previous versions of ITIL was that it was linear. So the service value chain was specifically designed to be flexible. And I always like to say that the activities are like Legos. You can combine them in different patterns, in different orders. And these patterns, you may use an activity more than once or skip an activity altogether. And so these patterns are actually called value streams. And so Donna, can you talk a little bit more about the concept of value streams and value chain activities?
Absolutely. So one of the things that ITIL 4 emphasizes is the need to streamline work. ITIL gets a bad rap sometimes as being perceived as overly bureaucratic and overly rigorous. So this focus on, let's take it up a level, let's take it up to the macro level, the value stream level, and understand the flow of work across our organization, across the different silos or work teams that we have in our organization, and look at those opportunities to streamline our work. In terms of how value streams and value chain activities interact, value chain activities can actually be configured into value streams, and not all value chain activities may be performed in a given value stream activity. So as an example here, I talk about as a scenario where maybe there's an incident, maybe it's a security related incident. Perhaps we have a user who contacts the service desk, and that's where we are engaging with that customer. We could also have and realize as the customer is interacting with the service desk that this actually isn't an incident. They're simply requesting access to a new product or service. So depending on the nature of that interaction, we might engage the incident management practice, or we might engage, and what I show here is the service request practice. Now, granting somebody access doesn't require us to design anything. It doesn't require us to transition any new feature or component of our product or service. We simply, via our information security practice, grant that service. So we can kind of very quickly move through from engaged to actually providing the support that that customer needs in order to access that new product or service. Same thing with, again, with incident management, where we have incidents that we can perhaps simply resolve by providing our customer with a solution. We don't have to design anything. There's no build activity that's necessarily occurring to, modify our software or install new hardware. We simply provide the solution, and we, most importantly, get feedback from our customer to ensure that this did, in fact, resolve the situation that they were experiencing. And as Joyce said, continuous improvement is always there. So we may get some feedback from our customer in terms of how we could have made that issue resolution a little bit easier for them. And we would pass that feedback back to the appropriate practice. Now, in ITIL 3, concepts like incident management, and Joyce mentioned things like problem management and change management, you historically referred to as processes. In ITIL 4, they've evolved to the concept of a practice, just to look at things a bit more holistically, and those practices reflect all 4 of the dimensions. One of the things to note is that the service desk, what we've historically called the service desk, and what we talked about as a function in ITIL 4 is actually now viewed as a practice in ITIL 4, in recognition of the fact that service desk can be handled in different ways, and it is, in fact, a capability. So you can, in this particular slide, we introduce at very much a high level the different practices that we see in ITIL 4. And Joyce, do you want to talk to these practices a little bit?
Yeah, sure. So in ITIL 4, there are 34 practices. And as Donna said, each practice supports multiple value chain activities. And on the last slide, she showed this with the service desk practice being interacted with in a couple of the different activities. And so the idea of practices being an evolution of the V3 processes is something we talk about in ITIL 4. But again, they're only part of the resources that are available to us in the form of the 4 dimensions. And so, for example, the people and organizations dimension is important because people have to perform the processes that we talked about. The technology and information dimension is critical. It helps us automate our processes and value streams and allows us to get feedback. It changes the roles and responsibilities of people and frees them up to do more experimental and innovative work. And let's not forget our partners and suppliers with whom we collaborate. So yeah, we focused on processes in the past in ITIL version 3, 2011. But now, as Donna said, this more holistic view of working kind of led us to the term practice. And so each of the ITIL 4 practice guides includes information about all 4 dimensions of service management. And they're available, the practice guides are available online at My ITIL, and we'll talk a little bit about that at the end of the session. So one interesting point, if you look at these practices, is that they're not all IT-centric. If you look at the left-hand column of practices, you can see practices that are really adopted or adapted from general business management domains. So project management, for example, risk management, financial management, not IT-centric. In the middle are the ones that are developed typically as part of organizations' IT service management journeys. So the problem and the incident and the change that we've talked to. And on the right-hand side are practices that we've had, but they've been expanded or maybe have a slightly different focus as we move from technology solutions to more delivering services. And so each organization, each of you has to decide which practices are applicable to, my circumstances and my needs. And so on the next slide, we actually have a little bit of a different view of the practices. And I don't see any questions in the chat about practices. Have I missed anything, Donna? I don't
No,
think I've missed any.
I haven't seen
So
anything yet, but if you have questions, go ahead and pop them in the chat and we'll answer them as we go along.
yeah, so I'll talk about a couple, and if that generates questions, great. One of the ones that people immediately focus on is change enablement. And so in ITIL 4, there's definitely a different focus. And it's in ITIL 4, change enablement is distinguished from organizational change management, one of the general management practices. As the organizational change management practices focuses on the people aspects of change. So managing resistance to change, embedding or sustaining new behaviors. Whereas change enablement focuses on changes to products and services. So there's a clear distinction in ITIL 4 between these two practices. And the word enablement of change enablement speaks to encouraging change, not controlling it so much. In version 3, we just spoke to change management, which encompassed both of the current ITIL 4 practices and got a little bit confusing. Another interesting point is that ITIL 4 decouples release management and deployment management. And in version 3, it was very confusing. It was called release and deployment management process. And in reality, the two are reversed and can be done independently. Huge, huge, huge DevOps concept. Decoupling these two minimizes the risk of making changes. Another one that's kind of an interesting change is in ITIL version 3, we spoke to the business relationship management process. And that has evolved in ITIL 4 to just the relationship management practice. And it's interesting because it encompasses co-creating value and the importance of involving and collaborating with all the stakeholders, both internal and external, not just the business. So those are just a few of the changes we've seen. And one of the new practices in ITIL 4 is the continual improvement practice. So Donna, why don't you take a little bit of time and talk about that one a little bit?
Well, and I will absolutely. And I'd also like to make one more point about business relationship management. Historically, business relationship management is a liaison role between a central IT department and the lines of business or the business units within an organization. And increasingly what we're seeing, and I'd be curious to see if anybody who's attending today has this going on in their organization, organizations are starting to embed IT into their different lines of business or into their different business units. So while there may still be a central IT department, it's significantly smaller. It might be handling mainly those services that are common to all of the different business units. But in an effort to be able to better understand customers, to be better able to co-create value, we have IT professionals being embedded into specific business units so that they can really get to understand the processes within that business unit or the services or the products that are provided by that business unit to the external customers of your organization. So that liaison role really doesn't exist in those organizations anymore. They've taken that middleman out of the role, so to speak, and they have, again, in an effort to both improve communication and collaboration and speed things up, we now see IT working directly, much more directly with business units. The other practice that Joyce asked me to talk about is continual improvement, and many of you are familiar with the continual improvement model. It was actually introduced in V2. It was introduced in V3. It's undergone a slight change in ITIL 4. There's a new activity that kind of explicitly states the need to take action. But this practice also, again, provides guidance on how important it is that you have people who are skilled in the different techniques that you need in order to continually improve, and finding those ways to ensure that improvement is occurring, hopefully on a daily basis at all levels of your organization. So it's critical. If you look at the highest performing organizations, what they really do differently is they continually improve. They're continually evolving. They're continually experimenting and trying new ways of working. They're much more tolerant of failure, and there's very much a focus on learning from failure and viewing failure as a learning opportunity. And that's really all part of this culture of continual improvement. So whether you came from version 2 or version 3, you're familiar with this phrase to adopt and adapt, and that concept still very much lives on in ITIL 4. Adopt simply means that you're adopting best practice and you make a commitment to understanding best practices and why these are in fact best practices, but you always have to adapt them to the specific needs and circumstances of your organization. So it's really important to understand that if your organization is going through an evolution right now, whether you're going through a digital transformation, maybe you're starting to more fully embrace concepts like Agile and Lean and DevOps, maybe you're bringing SRE in. You have to understand that as you make those changes to your ways of working, you have to adapt your ITIL practices and make sure that you're continually improving those practices so that they're not becoming obstacles to these new ways of working. And a lot of the DevOps community for a long time really pushed back on ITIL because their perception very much was that it was standing in the way of introducing these new ways of working. And ITIL 4 very much aims to emphasize this need to continually adopt and adapt. And the guiding principles very, very much come into play here. So Joyce, can you talk about the guiding principles a little bit?
Yeah, this is one of my favorite parts of ITIL because you really see the alignment with the other ways of working that Donna just mentioned. And to me, they're short little phrases which you can embed in the way you work. And I find myself using them in everyday life, which even more cements them in my thinking. And I actually have posters of the guiding principle and the DevOps 3 ways on the wall of my office. And they really help move us away from sometimes that rigid, prescriptive way that we work. And I use the term that they give people guide rails. And as you start embedding them into your day-to-day conversations, you'll actually start shaping your organization's culture. And so, for example, if someone asks, if we should do a certain improvement, we can say, well, how does that tie back to value for the customer? Or if someone says, well, how are we going to do something? We can say, well, we're going to do it iteratively. And after each iteration, we're going to ask stakeholders for feedback. So you can see Agile and DevOps perspectives there. Or if someone says, well, I just wrote this a whole long bit of documentation for our processes, what do you think? You can look and see if there's extra steps that make it too complex, right? Can people follow it? Is it practical? And then you can, of course, ask if it can be automated. And the key to remember is these are a set of principles, and to consider them as a whole, not just pick out one principle and use it. It doesn't, of course, mean you're going to use all the principles all the time, but you kind of just have them tucked in your back pocket and think about them as you go about your daily work. And also, organizations should define other principles based on their needs. So definitely, guiding universal, enduring set of principles. So speaking of the guiding principles, Donna, where do we go from here? What is our road ahead?
Right. So it's a journey, and continual improvement never stops. And I think the greatest thing that you can do is think of this as continual improvement. So there is no stop doing ITIL version 2, stop doing ITIL version 3, start doing ITIL 4 immediately. It is look at where you are, honor the past, right? Honor the hard work that you've put into introducing ITIL already into your organizations, and understand that at the time the processes and ways of working that you put in place were appropriate for the circumstances and needs of your organization. But it's also important to accept your current reality and think about how much our reality has changed this year. I just recently read a Gartner statistic that mentioned that 69% of organizations have accelerated their digital transformations this year as a result of the pandemic. So we all, if we didn't already understand the need to speed up and to be willing to continuously evolve, we absolutely have to accept that now. And that might mean drawing from any and all frameworks. So again, there's no Agile or ITIL or no DevOps or ITIL. It's and, right? How can we leverage all of these different frameworks and methods and ways of working? And also understand that if you have some, and I'm going to use this term in the V2, V3 concept, if you have some processes that you put in place in version 2 and version 3 and they're working fine, that's awesome. Take a peek at ITIL 4. Take a look at the practice guides for ITIL 4 and see if you can get some ideas about how to continually improve them, and see if maybe your organization has changed in a way that makes, again, improving those practices appropriate. And very much look to the future. Automation is necessary in this day and age. Artificial intelligence, machine learning are invaluable aspects of our life today, and we need to better understand how to leverage them, optimize, and automate. So if we really stay focused in on what practices are, particularly what the process component of those practices are, they're really enabling us to kind of standardize our work. And anytime you get to the point where you can standardize your work, then you should be looking at then next, how can you automate that work? So look to the future and find those opportunities to leverage automation and to leverage these merging ways of working that are finding their way into highest performing organizations. And really understand that the core concepts of ITIL remain intact. So one of the value propositions of ITIL is that common vocabulary. A lot of the vocabulary remains the same. Incidents are still incidents. Problems are still problems, right? So your investment, any training that you've provided to people in ITIL, any effort that you've put into introducing your ITIL in your organization are in fact protected, right? That kind of core, those core underlining principles of service management, you'll see have remain intact. Just figure out how you can now leverage ITIL 4 to evolve. And that means continue learning and keep trying to better understand not only ITIL 4, but these other frameworks and these other different ways of working that ITIL 4 is aligned with. So if you want to learn more, the way ITIL is structured, so many of you are familiar with the ITIL version 3 and ITIL version 2 publications, where there were kind of specific publications related to particular stages of the life cycle, for example, service strategy, service design, service transition. In ITIL 4, the core publications are actually aligned with the different certifications. So there's a publication associated with ITIL 4 Foundation, and then you see two primary streams in terms of education. You see managing professional, and that's really for people who are practitioners and have day-to-day involvement in one or more of the ITIL practices. And then you see the ITIL strategic leader stream, and the ITIL strategic leader stream focuses just on that. People who are involved in developing or executing your organization's digital strategy and making sure that the digital strategy that's in place for your overall organization is aligned with and successfully underpinned by your IT strategy. And then you see the ITIL strategist course called Direct, Plan, and Improve. And this particular course is, you can see, lives in both streams. And that's because it really focuses again on concepts like governance and continual improvement. And that improvement can be occurring at the strategic level, at the tactical level, at the operational level. It's in both of the streams because everyone needs to understand how can we improve, how can we influence improvement within our organization, what are the different techniques that we can use. And it also, one of the things I like most about this particular course is it really does place an emphasis on making sure that we're putting in place just enough control, that we're not creating a bureaucracy, we're not creating kind of an overly rigorous approach to work, that we have controls that are sufficient given the type of industry we're in or the regulatory controls that we need to address, but that they are not at all excessive. And then Joyce mentioned that we've got now the practice guide. So one of the things that's different, one of the things that you're used to in ITIL 3 and ITIL 2 is that the processes were described within the core publications. We now see that the practice guides are separate. And part of the reason why they've been pulled out of the publications is so that there's, number one, not a perception that this practice only occurs relative to this one particular part of the scheme, but also to allow them to evolve more efficiently. You know, typically with a publication, you can see with ITIL, there's been about 10 years between each release of the core publications. With the practice guides now being independent, we can take a much more agile and iterative approach as we see new ways of working introduced. Those can be added to the practice guides and be made available to people much, much more quickly. So I'm not seeing any questions. And again, if you have any questions, go ahead and stick them into the chat window. And if not, I'm going to kind of quickly talk through these different higher level certification courses. I talked about DPI and that it is universal to both of the streams, and it's really focusing on supporting a defined strategy. It is in digital and IT strategy that we actually define the strategy. Here we support a defined strategy. The managing professional stream I mentioned is for practitioners. So I'm not going to read all these bullets because you can read them. Create, deliver, and support really focuses on value streams, and it focuses on a couple of key value streams. One being how you create and deliver a new product or service, and the other being how you support, deal with some type of an incident related to a product or service, how you restore service in the event that something goes wrong. So it's in create, deliver, and support that you really see this emphasis on value streams. That's a big part of ITIL 4. Drive stakeholder value really focuses on the customer journey. I'm sure a lot of you are hearing a lot about customer experience and employee experience and the need to focus on that customer journey. That's really the emphasis in Drive Stakeholder Value. In fact, that's what that course does, is walk from end to end through the customer journey. High Velocity IT is about digital, simply put. So if your organization is going through a digital transformation, if you're being challenged to speed up, achieve higher levels of velocity, in relation to that digital transformation, High Velocity IT is for you. It's really in High Velocity IT that we very much see that emphasis on embedding and integrating Agile and Lean and DevOps and site reliability engineering into our organizations. And last but not least, digital and IT strategy. So here's where we focus on defining our strategy. So if you're in a leadership role in your organization, if you are aspiring to be in a leadership role in your organization, this is an excellent course, and it really focuses on making sure we understand that need to align the digital strategy with the overall business strategy. In this day and age, organizations that don't have a strong digital strategy simply aren't going to survive. And we're seeing that. We've been seeing that, and we saw that very much this year as organizations had to more actively rely on their digital products and services. For any of you that live in a VUCA environment where it's very volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous, right? There's a lot going on in your organization. Things are constantly changing. Again, this course is very, very much for you.